I once met a man whose eyes held the quiet weight of mountains. His name was Aarav. He wasn't famous or powerful. He was an ordinary craftsman from a valley where everyone learned to live in the shadow of a vast, unyielding mountain. That mountain had never been climbed. The villagers called it the Silent One, a peak so high that even echoes refused to return. Most people accepted it as part of the horizon, a boundary that marked where dreams should end. But not Aarav. He told me, "Every morning I wake up and it stares at me. It feels like it's daring me to move it." His friends laughed, his family warned him, yet something inside him couldn't rest. The mountain was more than stone. It was a question that refused to fade. I remember the first time I saw him prepare. No crowd, no ceremony, just a man tightening the straps on a worn-out bag. The air smelled of frost and disbelief. He turned to me and smiled. "If it refuses to move," he said softly, "then I will." Those words stayed with me. In that single sentence lived both surrender and rebellion. The understanding that life rarely moves for us, yet we can still move toward it. As he took his first step onto the cold trail, I felt something stir inside me too, a reminder that the path to any summit begins not with strength, but with a decision no one else can make for you.
The first days were kind to him, or perhaps he was too full of fire to notice the cold. Each sunrise painted the mountain gold, and Aarav climbed with steady faith, whispering to himself that every step mattered. I followed his journey from the valley, sometimes joining for a few hours, sometimes only watching from below as he became smaller against the endless gray. But as he climbed higher, the mountain began to test him. Path grew cruel. Rocks loosened beneath his feet, winds tore through his thin coat, and silence pressed on his ears like a heavy hand. Once, when he slipped and cut his palm, I told him to rest. He shook his head and said, "If I stop because of pain, I'll never learn what's beyond it." His voice trembled, but his eyes never looked down. By the third week, villagers whispered that he'd gone mad. "I fight something that never moves," they said. Even eagles avoid that peak. But there was something pure in his defiance, something that made me question my own boundaries. I realized we all have mountains, the unfinished dreams, the fears we avoid, the habits that chain us quietly. One evening, clouds swallowed the sky, and snow began to fall. I could barely see his torch flickering far above. Every gust seemed strong enough to end his story. Still, a faint light kept moving higher. I understood then that courage isn't the absence of struggle. It's the decision to keep climbing when no one believes you'll make it. When dawn came, the torchlight disappeared behind a ridge. I didn't know if he'd reached the top or if the mountain had swallowed him whole. All I knew was that the valley felt different, as if it too was holding its breath. Days passed and Aarav did not return. The villagers grew restless, whispering prayers mixed with pity. "The mountain took him," they said. I wanted to believe otherwise. Every evening I stood at the edge of the valley, watching that silent peak wrapped in mist, wondering what kind of man keeps climbing when the world gives him every reason to turn back. Then, one night, a flicker appeared near the ridge, a single orange spark trembling against the dark. It was his fire. Aarav was alive. Something in me surged, an ache between hope and awe. When he descended days later, thinner but brighter, the entire valley gathered to hear his story. He didn't speak of victory or triumph. He spoke of humility. "The mountain never moved," he said quietly, "but I did. I thought I was climbing to conquer it, but somewhere along the way, I realized it was never the mountain I was fighting. It was my own limits, my fear, my doubt." The crowd listened in silence. "Up there," he continued, "I found no glory waiting, only peace. the kind that comes when you stop arguing with what's unchangeable and start changing yourself. He smiled, not with pride, but with understanding. I remember that expression. It was the look of a man who had carried his weakness up a mountain and left it there. The villagers who once mocked him began to see the mountain differently. It no longer looked like a wall, it looked like a mirror, reflecting everything they were afraid to face. That night, as I walked home, the stars seemed closer. I understood why the mountain refused to move. It was waiting for someone brave enough to climb and learn its language. Years later, when people asked me about Aarav, I never spoke of the summit or the climb. I told them about the silence, the moment he stood before what refused to move and found movement within himself. That's what mountains are for, not to block us, but to show us what still sleeps inside us. Every time I doubt my own path, I look at that peak and remember his words, "If it refuses to move, then I will." And in that reminder, I always find the strength to take my next step.